It was a cold evening in Manhattan. The rain tapped lightly on the glass windows of the most exclusive rooftop restaurant in the city, La Fontaine Royale. Inside, polished men in tuxedos sipped aged wine, and elegant couples whispered over caviar beneath chandeliers that cost more than most people's cars. Outside, a sleek black Tesla pulled up to the private valet entrance. Out stepped a woman in her late 30s, tall, poised, and graceful. Her name was Ava Morgan, a self-made billionaire, the CEO of Orion Tech, one of the fastest-growing companies in America. But tonight, she wasn't here as a business magnate. She was simply looking to enjoy dinner after a grueling month of global negotiations. Wearing a cream-colored blazer, soft beige trousers, and minimalist heels, Ava approached the front entrance with quiet confidence. Her assistant had made the reservation under her name weeks ago. It wasn't just confirmed, it was personally acknowledged by the owner. "Good evening, I have a reservation under Ava Morgan," she said, her voice calm, almost warm. The host glanced at his screen, his smirk appearing before the words did. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't see your name here." Ava raised an eyebrow and pulled up the email confirmation on her phone. "Here. Confirmed. 8 p.m. Table for 2. The host barely looked at the phone before shaking his head. "I understand, but the system doesn't show anything. And we're fully booked. You can try again next week." Before Ava could reply, a sharply dressed manager appeared, Douglas Whitmore, a man whose reputation for arrogance preceded him. He stepped in smoothly, with a condescending smile. "Apologies, ma'am," Douglas said, subtly scanning Ava from head to toe. "We do have high standards for entry. I'm afraid walk-ins, even with emails, don't guarantee a table here." "I'm not a walk-in," Ava said quietly. "I'm a patron with a confirmed reservation." "Yes, well," Douglas said, smirking now, "some places just aren't for everyone." That sentence lingered in the air like a slap. Ava stared at him for a long, chilling second. There it was, the dismissive tone, the judgment. She'd seen it before. Not because she was a woman. Not even because of how she looked. But because sometimes, people couldn't see beyond their own small world. They couldn't imagine that someone like her, humble, composed, without bodyguards or diamonds, could own half the block. Her assistant, standing nearby, began to argue, but Ava gently raised her hand to stop him. "No need," she said quietly. She looked Douglas dead in the eyes and offered a soft, unnerving smile. "You just made a very, very big mistake." With that, she turned and walked away, not in defeat, but with the cold precision of someone who had already decided how this would end. And she already knew. In less than 48 hours, this building, this restaurant, would belong to her. And no one here would see it coming. The next morning, while New York's elite sipped their espresso and scrolled through gossip columns, a quiet transaction took place in the city's real estate underworld. A private LLC known only to a select few made an aggressive, all-cash offer to purchase the penthouse floor that housed La Fontaine Royale. The building's owners didn't ask questions. The price was too good. The paperwork moved fast. Too fast. What no one realized, not the realtors, not the staff, not even the current building management, was that the LLC was a shell company tied to Ava Morgan's private holding group. By Wednesday morning, the sale was final. By Wednesday evening, the entire staff of La Fontaine was met with a jarring surprise. A printed sign taped to the restaurant doors read, "Staff meeting. Immediate attendance required. No exceptions." Confused whispers filled the lobby as waiters, bartenders, and chefs shuffled in. The dining area had been stripped of its usual pomp. No candles, no piano, just cold fluorescent lights above. At the center of the room stood Ava, dressed in a black suit, flanked by 2 legal advisors and a silent man in a tailored gray coat, her head of private security. Some of the staff gasped. Others squinted, trying to place her. Only Douglas's face froze in recognition. His smirk vanished. "Good evening," Ava began, her voice even commanding. "3 days ago, I was denied entry into this establishment. I was told, despite having a confirmed reservation, that I didn't belong here." She paused, letting the words settle. "Today I do." The room fell silent. "As of 10 a.m. this morning, I am the legal owner of this building, including this restaurant. And effective immediately, Your employment is terminated." "All of you!" Gasps rippled through the room. Panic. Anger. One waiter began to protest, but Ava raised her hand. "You weren't part of the decision." "I know. But silence is complicity. And what happened that night wasn't just about a table. It was about arrogance, disrespect, discrimination." Douglas stepped forward, his face red. "This is outrageous. You can't." "I can," she said sharply, eyes piercing his. "And I did." As murmurs grew louder, Ava turned to leave, but something caught her eye. In the back of the room, near the kitchen door, stood a young janitor, barely 20, with wide eyes and a shaking mop in his hands. He looked terrified. Ava walked toward him slowly. "You were working that night?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I tried to tell the manager he was making a mistake, but he told me to shut up and keep cleaning." There was a long pause. "What's your name?" "Luis." Ava smiled, for the first time that evening. "You're not fired, Luis. You're promoted. Starting tomorrow, you're on my core operations team. I reward people who have courage when it matters most." The room stood in stunned silence as Ava walked out with her team. Douglas's jaw clenched. He had no idea this was just the beginning. He thought he'd insulted a nobody. But he had just declared war on the wrong woman and the empire behind her. 2 days later, the transformation had already begun. What was once La Fontaine Royale, the go-to haven for Manhattan's elite, had become a buzzing construction site. The golden signage was torn down. Chandeliers were dismantled. Every trace of the old world was being erased. In its place, something bold was rising, something new, something that did belong to everyone. But for Ava Morgan, this wasn't just a business move. It was personal. Sitting inside her sleek office high above the skyline, Ava reviewed the final blueprints of what would soon open in place of the old restaurant, a luxury rooftop restaurant named Elevation. Not just a place to eat, but a symbol, where merit and service, not status and stereotypes, would define who gets in. Her phone buzzed. "Luis is here," her assistant said. "Send him in," Ava replied, not looking up. Luis stepped inside nervously, still not quite used to walking across glass floors and into rooms filled with million-dollar decisions. But he was dressed well now. Ava's team had personally coached him, trained him, and within 48 hours, he had become one of the fastest learners they'd ever seen. "You said you wanted to see me, ma'am?" Ava looked up and smiled. "Stop calling me ma'am. You work with me now, not for me." Luis nodded, a bit sheepishly. "I have a task for you," Ava continued. "One that may be uncomfortable." She handed him a sleek black folder. Inside were printed profiles of the old restaurant's senior staff, Douglas included. Luis frowned. "Do I have to?" "No. But I want you to help with the interviews for the new hires. I want someone who understands both sides of the story. Someone who's seen how power can poison hospitality." Luis slowly smiled. "Then I'd be honored." Just as he turned to leave, Ava added, "Luis, if Douglas applies for any position, even as a busboy, you bring him to me personally." Luis blinked. "You think he'll apply?" Ava's expression was unreadable. People like him always return when they think the dust has settled. They never believe the world can change without them. Meanwhile, down in the now-vacant restaurant space, Douglas was watching. He had returned under the guise of retrieving personal items, but what he was really doing was pacing, furious. His network had crumbled overnight. Word had spread that Ava Morgan had fired an entire restaurant on a whim. But whispers were shifting. Some said it wasn't vengeance. It was justice. And now Douglas had a plan. He wasn't going down quietly. Later that night, in a smoky backroom in Midtown, he met with a shadowy figure from the city's underground investment world, a man who had once helped Douglas launder profits through quiet shell operations. "I need leverage," Douglas said, his voice dripping with hatred. "I need something on Ava Morgan. A scandal. A mistake. I don't care what it is." The man leaned forward, eyes glinting. "You're playing with fire." Douglas grinned. "Then let it burn." What Douglas didn't know was that Ava already knew he'd come for her. She wasn't just building a restaurant. She was laying a trap. Opening night. The new rooftop restaurant, Elevation, shimmered like a crown atop the Manhattan skyline. Guests flooded in, not just billionaires and influencers, but artists, single mothers, teachers, veterans, people from every walk of life. The velvet rope was gone. Entry now depended on one thing: respect. Ava stood at the edge of the open terrace, overlooking the city lights. She wore a tailored white suit, minimal jewelry, her expression calm but watchful. Reporters buzzed outside, drones hovered for coverage, and every major outlet was broadcasting the grand opening of the place that had defied tradition and revenge. But while guests toasted champagne and sampled world-class cuisine, Ava's mind was elsewhere. She had received a tip earlier that morning. A confidential email, sent from an anonymous source, claimed that Douglas had been digging through her past. That he had acquired an old sealed document from nearly a decade ago, from a time Ava thought was buried. Her hands tightened around the edge of the glass railing. Back when Ava was just starting Orion Tech, she'd made one decision that had nearly tanked her company. A decision involving a secret acquisition from a failed startup, one that came with a non-disclosure agreement and a whispered lawsuit. Though nothing illegal was proven, the story had been scrubbed from the press. If Douglas got his hands on it. Just then, Luis appeared beside her, holding a tablet. "We have a situation downstairs," he said, carefully. Douglas just walked in, dressed as press. Ava's eyes narrowed. "Let him up." Luis hesitated. "You sure?" "I've been waiting for this," she replied. 5 minutes later, Douglas stepped into the terrace, holding a mic, a camera crew behind him. His smile was venomous. "Well, well," he began, loud enough for nearby guests to turn. "Congratulations on your little revolution. Or should I say, redemption?" Ava turned slowly. "Enjoying the food? Or here to beg for a job?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Douglas smirked but kept going. "I thought the world deserved to know more about their new hospitality hero. So I did some digging. Back in 2016, Orion Tech. The silent merger. The lost investors. The settlement." Whispers spread. Ava remained still. "Come." Douglas raised his mic. "Would you like to comment before the story goes live tomorrow? Or should I just press send?" Silence. Then Ava said, loud and clear, "Sure. But maybe your viewers would like to see what's already on file about you." She turned to Luis. He tapped the tablet. Within seconds, all 5 large digital panels on the terrace lit up, not with a view of the skyline, but with video footage. Security footage. From La Fontaine Royale. The night Ava was denied entry. There was Douglas, smirking, saying, "Some places just aren't for everyone." Then another clip, a whistleblower video from a former employee, describing Douglas's racial bias, his mistreatment of staff, his secret cash-only side dealings with customers. Gasps turned into murmurs of outrage. "Would you like to comment?" Ava asked coolly. "Before your story goes live?" Douglas turned pale. He looked to the cameraman. "Turn it off." Too late. The crowd had seen it. And Ava wasn't done. "For the record," she added, her voice strong, "I've made mistakes. I've learned from them. I've built something that lifts others instead of stepping on them. Can you say the same?" Douglas said nothing. Then, Luis stepped up and calmly handed him a small card. "This is your official ban notice. You are prohibited from entering this property for the rest of your life." Douglas, humiliated and defeated, turned and stormed out. The crowd erupted in applause. As the music resumed and the celebration roared back to life, Ava stepped aside, staring out at the city that had once shut its doors on her. She didn't just own the restaurant now. She owned the narrative. And no one, not men like Douglas, not outdated power structures, could ever deny her seat at the table again.